Hi everyone, welcome. So if you missed class, this video will kind of guide you through what we did in class. And I'll try to make it brief. So just another heads up. So this would be Thursday or Friday, October 23rd or 22nd. And your homework last class was the non-renewable energy resource artifacts. So definitely check in on that if you do not remember doing it. So my quick check-in with everyone was, if you had one superpower, what would it be? Mine would be sleeping less than I do, because I need so much sleep. Okay, so again, we are on Liz John Aloni land that was stolen. And the agenda is we're going to do a do now that's on Pear Deck. We are going to explore the impacts of oil drilling together as a class. And then what people did in breakout rooms was they worked on looking into either natural gas or coal and how it is mined. All right. And then there's a homework assignment I'll explain. So what we did for the do now, which you will not be able to do, is that you have 20 seconds to complete the multiple choice on each slide. And so you would answer, the first one is true or false. Every state uses coal as a resource to generate electricity. And it is false because there are certain states that do not use coal and it is banned. And California is one of them that does not use coal. Next question is, which of the following non-renewable energy resources emit the most carbon emissions? And I gave you three options, and the three options are coal, natural gas, and oil. And the answer is coal. Which country uses the most coal as an energy source? And that is China. Most people got that right. True or false, every country produces the same amount of renewable energy resources. That is false because natural resources are distributed unevenly across the earth. Like Saudi Arabia has a lot more oil than, say, the US does, or than France does or something. Okay. So those were our multiple choice. What we did in class was we went deeper and further along into our Unit 1 non-renewable energy sources unit, and we talked about the impacts of mining and extraction. So the problem that we're going to examine today are, what are the impacts of mining coal, oil, and natural gas? All right. So, let me fix that real quick. The beauty of this is I can pause this. Okay, so I fixed it. All right, I just want to give a quick reminder of what the process of producing oil is like. So step one, what you guys looked and saw in the artifact, step one is drilling. So either ocean drilling or drilling on land. Step two is you have to transport that raw oil to a refinery site to process that oil. So you need some sort of transportation. Often it is pipeline, sometimes they drive it, sometimes it's by train, but oftentimes it is pipeline. And it looks like this. And so you can see here on this map, there are this many pipelines in the US, which is a lot. And then it has to be sent to a refinery. So this is where they process the oil so it can be used at like gas stations and whatnot. And you can see here that a lot of the refineries are located in the south, which is why all of the lines kind of congregate right here. Okay, so we're gonna focus today. I just wanna remind us that we're gonna talk about oil spills, and then we're gonna talk about the drilling and the transporting via pipelines. But I wanna remind us that oil spills could happen at any of these steps. So first we're gonna talk about all three of them real quick, all right? So I have breaking news, and that breaking news is that off the coast of the Trinidad and Tobago, which is at the outer edge of the Caribbean, there is a oil tanker that has 1.3 million barrels of oil in there. And the ship is tilted. The ship is like permanently on the side in the ocean as like a holding tank for this oil. And you can see here the scientist has gone out there and is showing us an aerial view of this ship, which is wild. You can see it from here that it is just on a huge tilt. 1.3 million barrels of oil. So then I asked the class on the Pear Deck, if 1.3 million gallons of oil were to spill into the ocean off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago, what type of damages would happen? And I would encourage you to use as much environmental vocabulary as you can. So people gave answers such as like, it's bad for wildlife, it'll affect the pH balance of the ocean, it'll like, affect the coral reefs. I heard that one a lot. And so I explained that oil spills are really, really awful for wildlife, especially marine life. Birds cannot withstand any oil. It causes them to go into hypothermia. It causes them to be less buoyant for like ducks and other waterfowl. The fish and all of the aquatic life is damaged. For humans, anywhere near an oil spill, like if there's any neighborhoods or communities near it, they cause severe respiratory, skin, and carcinogenic health problems, meaning cancer. And so when an oil spills, that oil not only leaks into the water, but it also gets released into the air. And so concentrated amounts of that lead to these things. Now, we can't forget about the economic damage that comes with oil spills too, right? So like tourism, Trinidad and Tobago is a huge tourist destination. And if a 1.3 million barrels of oil gets spilled off the coast and then that oil starts washing up on shore and all of these dead marine lives, people are not gonna wanna go there for a while. And that's a huge hit on the economy there. Other things would be like if it was a big fishing country, the fishermen would be out of work for the next bit, if not years later, as the marine life tries to recover from this. And so the industries that heavily rely on the water and rely on the resources that get tainted are definitely affected. And like I said, these impacts last for years. They can do a cleanup job, but still there is always going to be residue left that continues the harm and throws everything out of balance. So that's like the impact of oil spills. It's very wide, and so I gave kind of like broad strokes. So now I want us to now start focusing in on certain parts of the process and where things can go wrong. And so I want to focus on, you have all 3 of these steps, and I want to focus on drilling. And so other than spilling oil, what about drilling can be harmful? All right. So, okay, so remember we have the deep sea drilling, and that is where you have an oil rig that sits out in the middle of the ocean or the sea. And basically there are structures that go all the way down to the sea floor and then drill into that sea floor. Now, you might be wondering, might be asking yourself, like, how do they build things underwater like this? How do they know where to put things? How do they know what the sea floor looks like, right? And so they don't send scuba divers down there. They actually send these low sound frequency waves. So almost like kind of like radio waves. They're sent into the water to explore the deep ocean in order to set up a drill. So that has repercussions to wildlife, and I want to think about what that might be. But first, I want to talk about drilling on land. So usually drilling will look a little bit like this. You just have like these big structures and pumps and all of these things here. And then there is some kind of drill that goes down, down, down into the ground to hit the oil reserve. Now, when you drill on land, oftentimes vegetation and wildlife are cleared at the site, and you can see that here. And what are the repercussions when you get rid of vegetation and wildlife? And then also this applies to both of them. When the oil and gas reservoirs are no longer economic to be mined, meaning that it takes more money to mine than it does to sell, that's when companies stop drilling. And so that doesn't mean that the oil has run dry, but it just means that it's no longer economic for them to do so. And so then these companies will, I just realized, hopefully you guys are able to hear me with that. Then these companies will plug the hole with a cement type of like contraption, a cement plug of sorts. to prevent the oil from spilling out. So talking kind of through this process, I asked the question of, aside from what impacts do deep sea drilling or drilling on land have? And so I saw the questions that came up. I then explained that the impacts of drilling is that marine life is negatively impacted by low sound frequency waves. You might be asking how? Well, there has been an increase in beach whales as the sound waves disorient them. So meaning when the deep sea drilling began, people saw an uptick of beached whales that ended up being washed ashore. And this is because whales communicate and orient themselves via their own wavelengths. So when there is a different wavelength that comes in, it confuses them and disorients them and like points them in the wrong direction of their migration route. And then they end up being close to shore and accidentally being washed up. So that's an impact of deep water drilling. Obviously, with both of these, there are habitat loss for the organisms. And oftentimes, if there is a specialized species, that is a big impact. There's also increased erosion when it comes to land drilling. Now, I want to explain that real quick. If you think it's caused by the removal of plants, as plants are the hands that keep the soil in place. So if you think about it, plant roots are kind of like these hands that reach into the ground and hold the soil in place, whether it's on the mountainside or on the ground, on the flat ground. And so without those hands, the soil is just much looser. There's less things holding it in place. And so that leads to increased erosion. If there's wind, if there's water running through it, all of those elements tend to wash the soil away quicker. And then obviously, with any man-made contractions, there's always errors. So that cement plug that companies use to stop the oil mining, oftentimes they malfunction and the oil from in that reservoir starts coming out again. So it is possible for oil to leak out of the ground if it is not the cement plug malfunctions. All right. So that's drilling. Now, back to the production process. You guessed it, we're moving on to step 2. Oh, that's really cheesy. But we're moving on to step 2, and we're talking about the transportation of oil, in particular, the transportation via pipeline. Oh, no. Okay, I'm going to fix this slide real quick. Okay, much better. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the pipeline and the transportation of that oil that's just been drilled. So I want to talk about, in particular, I want to talk about the Keystone XL pipeline. So has anyone heard of the Keystone pipeline? You guys would have been in middle school when this happened. But there was a really contested issue right as Obama became president, and it was debating whether or not they should build a pipeline. And so there is a huge tar sand oil mining operation in Canada. There's also actually huge tar sand oil mining operations all over Canada, but this one's especially large here. And so Canada wanted to export their crude oil, meaning their unrefined oil, down to our refinery factories down here in Texas. And so this would have been economically, it would have made us a lot of money. Economically, also, we would have a steady stream of oil. However, this pipeline would go through a lot of land. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Standing Rock happened in 2017, the protests, 2017 to 18 maybe. And in Standing Rock, because there's a huge native reservation here. They're all over, but there's a particularly large stand right here in Standing Rock. And so they were protesting this Keystone pipeline because it would cross their native land. Now, in addition to trampling all over native land, there is also something that people were really concerned about, is the Ogallala Aquifer. Now, aquifers are underwater freshwater reserves, very important. And the Ogallala Aquifer, as you can see, is exceptionally large. And so the Ogallala Aquifer actually provides 30% of the fresh water we use in agriculture nationwide. And so 30%, that would be, that's a huge amount of water being used. And so running a pipeline through this, you risk leaks, you risk the building of the pipeline contaminating the water sources. And that would just mean so much havoc on the agricultural industry if that were to happen. So knowing this case study about this pipeline, I asked the class, aside from the oil spills, what impact would there be in building a pipeline? And so then I said the impacts of the pipeline are habitat loss and destruction, the threat of oil leaking, of course, and water source contamination, and then also native land degradation. But native land degradation is just like everywhere, so I didn't put it in as a bullet point. These are the big ones. So now we kind of talked our way through how the impacts of drilling, right? Both the environmental and economic impacts of producing and transporting oil. So now, aside from oil, we also have natural gas and coal. So instead of doing it as a whole class, I asked you guys to go into breakout rooms and examine artifacts that I've given to you about coal and natural gas. And so I split you guys up into groups of 3 or 4. And what you did was you went onto these slides that I made for you, and you filled out information about it. So for natural gas, you figured out what's the process of fracking, what's the environmental impact, what is the economic impact. For coal, what are the 2 types of coal mining, and their mountaintop removal and subsurface mining, and then what are the impacts of mountaintop removal and subsurface mining. So I put you in groups in order to fill those out. And these slides are accessible to you on Google Classroom if you want to go back and look at what your classmates have made. Okay, and then your homework assignment is to research a case study about fossil fuels that you did not research today. Meaning, if in class, if you had done your research and looked at the artifact about natural gas, I wanted you to find a case study for homework that is on coal, and vice versa. So if you didn't attend class at all, you could just choose between the 2 of them. And I will show you, and of course this is due Sunday at midnight, so I'll show you in the Google Classroom where it is. So it's here. Case study, impacts of mining. So what you're going to do is you're going to find a case study of an incident in which the extraction of natural gas or coal resulted in harmful impacts for the land or people. It does not to be recent or in the US. So some keywords I would use are coal or natural gas, obviously. Look up case studies, look up environmental damage, look up accidents. Those are all good keywords to research. So make sure that you link your resources that you found, and then also I want you to be able to summarize the situation as well as cite things to answer these questions. So for example, you see this one, include 2 pieces of evidence from your articles, and number 2, make sure to explain each of the evidences. All right. Okay, so that is your homework, and of course, click here to for a link to the presentation slides. So this link will take you to the impacts of mining that your classmates worked on. All right, and that is it. I have nothing else for you. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you next class.